In the bustling streets of New York City, where the skyline kisses the heavens and the rhythm of life never falters, stories intertwine in unexpected ways. Amidst the ceaseless rush, most people remain indifferent to those around them, unless something extraordinary commands their attention. It was on such a seemingly ordinary afternoon that Amelia Johnson, a poised and confident woman in her early 40s, strolled into the Madison Avenue Jewelry Gallery. This wasn't a casual visit. It was a moment meticulously planned. For weeks, Amelia had dreamed of finding the perfect piece to surprise her husband, Derek, on their 10th wedding anniversary. She envisioned a gift that would encapsulate their journey together, a decade of love, resilience, and shared triumphs. But Amelia wasn't just any shopper. She was a prominent lawyer renowned for her passionate advocacy for equality and justice. Her presence in the store should have been unremarkable, but fate had other plans. The jewelry gallery gleamed with an aura of exclusivity. Its polished windows displayed diamonds that sparkled like captured stars, each piece a testament to opulence. As Amelia entered, she admired the serene elegance of the store, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. Her eyes soon landed on a dazzling diamond pendant, its brilliance reflecting the light like 1,000 promises. She could almost see Derek's face light up when he saw it. "Can I help you with something?" A voice interrupted her thoughts, slicing through the tranquility. Amelia looked up to see a tall, blonde employee behind the counter. The woman's demeanor was coldly professional, yet something lurked beneath, a flicker of disdain that betrayed her polished facade. "Yes," Amelia replied with a warm smile, pointing to the pendant. "I'd like to see this necklace, please." The employee hesitated, her eyes narrowing as she studied Amelia. The pause was subtle but heavy, loaded with silent assumptions. After a moment, she unlocked the case and handed over the necklace, her smile as forced as her courtesy. As Amelia held the pendant, marveling at its intricate design, she felt the woman's gaze on her, a piercing scrutiny that felt less like curiosity and more like suspicion. Amelia had encountered this before, the unspoken question of her right to belong in spaces like these. "How much is this?" Amelia asked, striving to keep her tone light despite the tension building in her chest. The employee's lips tightened. "Are you sure you can afford this?" The words were a dagger, sharp and deliberate. Amelia's heart skipped, her pulse quickening. She had faced prejudice before, but this blatant challenge to her worthiness stung deeply. Maintaining her composure, she replied, "Yes, I'm sure." Her calm response seemed to irritate the employee further. "I think it would be better if you returned it to the case," the woman said, louder this time, drawing the attention of nearby customers. Embarrassment burned through Amelia as whispers rippled around her. Reluctantly, she placed the necklace back. "There's no need for that," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the rising storm within. But it was too late. The employee had already summoned a security guard. Amelia's throat tightened as the tall man approached, his expression stern yet unreadable. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, glancing between Amelia and the employee. "This woman was trying to steal that necklace," the employee declared, her voice carrying through the store like a gunshot. Amelia froze, disbelief washing over her. "I wasn't," she began, but the guard interrupted. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me." Humiliation engulfed her as she followed the guard, the weight of judgment pressing heavily on her shoulders. She could feel the stares, hear the faint clicks of phone cameras capturing her walk of shame. In the security office, the truth emerged. Footage cleared her of any wrongdoing, but the damage was done. The ache of injustice lingered like a wound that refused to heal. When Amelia recounted the ordeal to Derek later that night, his face darkened with fury. "They treated you like a criminal?" he demanded, his voice taut with restrained anger. Amelia nodded, her voice breaking as she recalled the humiliation. "They didn't even give me a chance to explain." Derek's fists clenched. "This isn't over," he vowed. What the store employees hadn't realized was that Derek wasn't just Amelia's husband. He was the owner of the entire mall. The next morning, a fire of determination burned in his eyes. Together with Amelia, he resolved to confront the injustice head-on. This wasn't just about vindicating Amelia. It was about exposing the systemic prejudice that thrived in silence. As they delved deeper, unraveling threads of discrimination, they unearthed something even darker. A conspiracy targeting Derek's business itself. The fight for justice had begun, and Amelia and Derek were ready to wage it. Not just for themselves, but for everyone who had ever been judged, silenced, or shamed simply for existing. This was no longer a personal battle. It was a crusade for dignity, equity, and change. One afternoon, as the golden rays of sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, Derek glanced up from his coffee cup and noticed Amelia sitting across from him, lost in thought. Her phone buzzed incessantly on the table beside her, untouched, as if she couldn't hear it, or chose not to. He set his mug down gently, the faint clink breaking the silence, and reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "You've been quiet," Derek said softly, his voice filled with concern. His warm, steady gaze met hers, searching for answers. "What's on your mind?" Amelia sighed, rubbing her temples as though trying to knead away the weight pressing on her thoughts. "It's just all of this," she began, her voice tinged with frustration. "It feels bigger than me now. I'm glad we spoke out. But the more I think about it, the more I realize how much change is still needed. And I'm not sure if I'm ready for all of it." Derek's hand tightened around hers, his reassurance palpable. "You don't have to do it all at once," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You've already made a huge impact, Amelia. You've opened doors for others. But don't forget, you need to take care of yourself, too." A small smile tugged at the corners of her lips. Derek always had a way of grounding her when the world seemed too heavy. But deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. Her voice had grown louder, amplified by the movement she had sparked. And now, there were expectations, voices looking to her for guidance, for action. Later that week, her phone rang with a call from Marcus. "Hey, I've been doing some digging," he said, his tone serious. "I think you need to know something." Amelia's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" Marcus hesitated, his words heavy with implication. "I was going through some old reports and found out. This isn't the first time there's been trouble at that jewelry store. There have been other complaints, racial profiling, discriminatory treatment, the whole thing. But it's been buried." Her brow furrowed, her stomach knotting. "How is that possible? How has no one said anything before?" "That's the thing," Marcus replied grimly. "People did say something, but management hushed it up, paid off some victims, threatened others with legal action if they went public. They've been covering this up for years." Amelia felt the world tilt beneath her. This wasn't just her battle. It was part of a pattern, a sickening history allowed to fester unchecked. "We can't let this slide," she said firmly, her voice sharpening with resolve. "If this has been happening for years, they need to be held accountable. For all of it." Marcus agreed, but with a caveat. "We'll need more than what we have now. We need people to come forward to share their stories." Amelia's mind raced. "I'll take care of that. I'll reach out to the media. See if we can get people to speak up." Over the next few days, Amelia threw herself into action. She contacted reporters, lawyers, and civil rights organizations, piecing together a case that would expose the store's dark history. Slowly, stories began to emerge. Former customers who had suffered indignities stepped forward, their voices raw with pain, but fueled by a shared desire for justice. One woman, Linda, a single mother, recounted being accused of trying to return stolen jewelry. Her voice trembled as she described the humiliation she felt when the store couldn't find her in their system. "They treated me like a criminal," she said, her hands shaking. "I didn't even have the strength to fight back. I just left." Carlos, another victim, shared how he and his fiancée had been stopped by security while browsing for wedding rings. His voice hardened as he said, "They didn't believe I was serious about buying anything. They looked at me and assumed I couldn't afford it." Each account painted a damning picture of systemic prejudice, a culture so ingrained that it poisoned every interaction. It wasn't just one employee, one incident. It was a rot that had seeped into the foundations of the store. At a press conference days later, Amelia stood at the podium, flanked by Linda, Carlos, and others who had found the courage to step forward. The room was electric, cameras flashing as Amelia began to speak. "I'm standing here today not just for myself," she said, her voice steady but laced with emotion, "but for everyone who has ever been made to feel less than because of who they are. What happened to me at this jewelry store wasn't an accident. It was part of a pattern. And today, we're here to expose it. Linda stepped forward, her voice quivering as she recounted her experience. I was accused of stealing, humiliated in front of my daughter. But I stayed silent because I was scared. I'm not scared anymore. Carlos followed, his anger simmering beneath every word. They treated me like I didn't belong, like I wasn't good enough. I'm done being silent. This stops now. Amelia's closing words struck like a thunderclap. We're not asking for much. We're asking for respect, dignity, and the right to exist without being judged based on assumptions. And we will not stop until we see real change. The media coverage was unrelenting. Within days, the jewelry store's corporate office issued a public apology, announced an internal investigation, and implemented mandatory diversity training. The manager complicit in perpetuating the discrimination was fired. But Amelia wasn't finished. She and Marcus worked tirelessly to build a legal case. Testimonies, documents, security footage, it all became part of their arsenal. The trial was grueling, but Amelia's determination never wavered. Finally, justice prevailed. The store was found guilty, ordered to compensate victims, and mandated to overhaul its practices. As Amelia left the courthouse, Derek by her side, she felt a wave of relief. The fight wasn't over, but they had made a difference, a powerful step toward justice. And as they sat together that evening, the weight of their victory settled over them like a comforting blanket. Change was slow, but it was happening, one step at a time. Amelia's mind raced as she reached out to her network of legal contacts, determined to make a difference for Kendra. She connected her with a lawyer who specialized in employment discrimination, and together, they painstakingly documented every detail, every disparaging comment, every promotion Kendra had been passed over for, and every time her concerns were brushed aside. With each detail they uncovered, the case against the retail store became clearer, stronger, and undeniable. Meanwhile, Amelia's commitment to advocacy only grew. She wasn't just fighting for Kendra anymore. She was fighting for something bigger. Her voice had become a rallying cry for all those who had been silenced and overlooked for far too long. The more she spoke, the louder the call for change echoed. And it didn't stop there. As Kendra's case gained momentum, the media took notice. News outlets began drawing sharp comparisons between Kendra's struggle and Amelia's own battle against the jewelry store. The parallels were impossible to ignore. The public was furious, and the pressure on the retail store to respond became unbearable. But instead of confronting the allegations head-on, the store's management tried to bury the truth, just as they had done countless times before. This time, however, the world was watching, and they weren't going to let the store sweep it under the rug. The walls were closing in. As Kendra's legal team continued to build their case, more employees came forward, sharing their own experiences of discrimination within the company. It became crystal clear that Kendra's ordeal was not an isolated incident. It was part of a deeply ingrained pattern of behavior. The company had created a toxic culture, systematically sidelining people of color, ignoring their contributions, and closing doors to opportunities. The weight of this realization was overwhelming. When the case finally made it to court, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Reporters filled the gallery, their cameras flashing nonstop, while outside, protesters gathered in droves, holding signs that demanded justice not just for Kendra, but for everyone who had suffered at the hands of the company. The air was electric. Amelia sat in the courtroom, her heart pounding as she watched Kendra take the stand. The young woman who had once been timid and unsure now stood tall, recounting her experiences with strength, clarity, and unshakable resolve. Her voice quivered slightly, but her words carried the power of someone who had fought too hard to be silenced any longer. I worked hard, Kendra said, her voice unwavering. I earned the right to be considered for those promotions, just like everyone else. But I was never given a fair chance, and that's not right. The defense tried to paint Kendra as nothing more than a disgruntled employee, someone who was simply unhappy with her position and looking for someone to blame. But the evidence was irrefutable. Testimonies from other employees, emails, patterns of favoritism. It all pointed to a system designed to hold people like Kendra back. The jury saw it too. They sided with Kendra, finding the company guilty of discriminatory practices. They were ordered to pay a substantial settlement, but the real victory came in the form of sweeping changes, mandatory diversity training for all employees, and a complete overhaul of the company's hiring and promotion policies. It was a game-changing moment, not just for Kendra, but for anyone who had ever been wronged by an oppressive system. It sent a powerful message. Discrimination would no longer be tolerated. As Amelia and Kendra walked out of the courtroom, the weight of the victory washed over them. Kendra was smiling, but her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't think I could have done this without you." Amelia smiled and pulled Kendra into a warm embrace. "You did this," she said softly. "I just helped you see that you could." The case made headlines for weeks, igniting a nationwide conversation about discrimination in the workplace and the urgent need for systemic change. Companies everywhere began to reassess their policies, terrified of becoming the next target of public scrutiny. For Amelia, the fight was far from over, but this victory had brought her closer to her goal. They had taken a stand, and they had won. At home, one quiet evening, as Amelia and Derek sat together, the hum of the city outside their window, Derek glanced at her, his eyes filled with admiration. "You know," he said softly, "I always knew you were strong, but watching you these last few months, I've never been prouder of you." Amelia smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "I couldn't have done it without you." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, but Amelia's mind was already racing ahead, thinking about the future. There was so much more to be done. "I was thinking," she said after a while, "about starting an organization. Something bigger. Something that could help people like Kendra. People who don't have the resources or the voice to fight back on their own." Derek smiled and kissed the top of her head. "I think that's a brilliant idea. And I think you're just the person to do it." Amelia's heart swelled with excitement. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but nothing worth fighting forever is. The journey ahead was long, but she was ready. She had already proven to herself and the world that one person could make a difference. And now, she was ready to take that difference even further. Weeks after Kendra's case had wrapped up, Amelia couldn't shake the thought of building something more. A movement that could not only help people like Kendra, but also challenge the systemic injustice that plagued entire industries. She had witnessed firsthand how powerful it could be to give people a platform to speak out. But she knew there were so many others still too afraid or unsure of where to turn. Amelia spent countless days mapping out her vision, pouring her heart and soul into this dream. She envisioned an organization that wouldn't just offer legal support. It would offer hope, guidance, and the courage to stand up and fight. It would be more than a law firm. It would be a movement, a force for accountability, fairness, and justice. One evening, after scribbling her 100th idea on a notepad, Derek looked up from across the room. "You've been busy," he remarked, nodding toward the papers scattered across the dining table. "I have," Amelia replied, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "I think I'm ready to start building this thing. But I'm going to need help." Derek stood up, walking over to her, and glancing over the notes she had written. "You'll get it," he said confidently. "There are people out there who want to see change just as much as you do. All you have to do is ask." Amelia smiled, grateful for his unwavering support. He was right. She couldn't do this alone, but she didn't have to. Over the next few weeks, she reached out to her network, lawyers, activists, community leaders, and even some of the people who had stood by her during the fight with the jewelry store. The response was overwhelming. Word spread, and soon people were offering their support, eager to be part of something bigger than themselves. Meetings took place in small conference rooms, living rooms, and cafes, each one full of passion and determination. The goal was clear: to create an organization that would not only fight for justice, but demand systemic change. Amelia knew that this wouldn't be easy, but she was ready. The Justice Collective was born. The launch came faster than expected. With a handful of passionate supporters alongside her, Amelia organized a public event at a local community center to announce the new organization. The night of the launch, the hall was packed. Reporters, lawyers, activists, and people from all walks of life filled the room. Some had come out of curiosity. Others had been personally affected by discrimination. But they all shared one thing in common. They wanted to be part of something that would make a difference. Amelia took the stage, her heart pounding with anticipation. As she looked out at the crowd, gratitude filled her. This was bigger than anything she had ever imagined, but it was exactly what she had hoped for. "Thank you all for being here," Amelia began, her voice strong but emotional. The Justice Collective was born out of a personal fight for dignity and respect, but it has grown into something much larger. We are here today because we believe that no one should have to fight injustice alone. We are here because we know that change doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen when we stand together. The crowd erupted in applause. The energy was electric. "This is just the beginning," Amelia continued. "We have a long road ahead, but with every case we take on, every voice we amplify, and every system we hold accountable, we are moving closer to the world we know is possible. A world where no one is judged by the color of their skin, their gender, their background, or their beliefs. A world where justice is not just a word, but a reality for everyone." By the end of the event, the Justice Collective had gained dozens of new supporters, volunteers, and donations. It was clear that people were tired of waiting for someone else to make things right. They were ready to fight for change. In the months that followed, the Justice Collective grew rapidly. Amelia and her team took on case after case: workplace discrimination, housing injustice, police misconduct. Each victory made them stronger, but the road was far from smooth. There were moments of frustration, setbacks, and long legal battles. But through it all, Amelia refused to lose hope. One night, after a particularly grueling day in court, Amelia came home exhausted. Derek was waiting for her, and as soon as he saw the look on her face, he knew something was wrong. "I don't know if I can do this," Amelia admitted, sinking into the couch. "This case is too big. They're too powerful. It feels like no matter what we do, they're always one step ahead." Derek sat beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You've come this far, Amelia. Don't forget what you've already accomplished. These things take time, but you're fighting the right fight. That's what matters." Amelia leaned her head back, letting out a heavy sigh. "I just don't want to let anyone down. So many people are counting on us." "You won't let them down," Derek reassured her. "You've built something incredible here. And you have a team that believes in the same things you do. Trust them. Trust yourself." Amelia nodded, feeling a small spark of hope reignite in her chest. Derek was right. She couldn't lose sight of the bigger picture. They were working towards something bigger than themselves. And no matter how slow the progress, it was still progress. Months later, the case against the retailer reached a monumental breakthrough. After years of legal battles, the court ruled in favor of the plaintiffs. The retailer had been found guilty of discriminatory practices. It was a victory not just for the individuals involved, but for the powerful message it sent across the nation. No company, no matter how powerful, could escape accountability. The fight was far from over, but the Justice Collective had proven that change was possible. And they were just getting started.